And we'd like to welcome to the Soul to Soul virtual studio, Mr Steve Lyddy. Hello Steve, welcome to the station.
Hello Steve, it's like talking to yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, both having a great name there. Now Steve, you're a life coach of many years experience. Tell us a bit about what you do.
Well, first of all, I don't like being called a life coach. I'll explain that.
Okay.
The reason for that is because life coaches are a dime a dozen. There's academies out there, and I use that term loosely, churning out life coaches at 25, 30 years old, and I sort of scratch my head and think, well, hold on a minute, you haven't even had a life yet, so how do you call yourself a life coach? Mm-hmm. So sure, you perhaps may have some of the theory, but the difference is I not only have the theory and the skills sets, but also have a life of experience.
Right.
So I've done the dramas, I've done the events, I've had the experiences, I've got the warts and the scars and the bruises to prove it,
So what do you prefer to call yourself as far as
a mindset mentor.
Mindset mentor,
yeah.
Okay. Is that because you focus more in the realms of the mind, do you think?
Well, it's a good question. So the answer is both yes and no, because certainly the mind, both at a conscious and a subconscious level, but also very much in the heart and in intuition level as well. So it's Mindset Mentor is really just an abbreviated version. When I've talked to my my mentors, about how one presents themselves in the market, heart and mind mentor was one statement that came up. Right. But for, if you like, for a positioning statement for marketing purposes, it's simply easier to call myself a mindset mentor.
Right. Now, you've been doing this, over 20 years now, is that about right?
Yes, I have actually. I've been coaching in one capacity now for 25 years. I came into it and realised I was coaching people. I had a financial planning practice in Mornington for 15 years, along with another partner. And we found that 70% of the work that we're actually doing with clients had nothing to do with numbers. It was actually what was going on between their ears and between their rib cage.
Right, interesting.
And most of our interviews, we'd end up with a box of tissues in the middle of the table. So they're coming in to see a financial planner, but really they were actually coming in for some comfort.
Yeah.
And sure, people look for that financial security, but what is finance security about? It's about comfort. And of course then we address all of those things. We ended up designing a needs analysis and programs which were 70% what we term as psychographics and only 30% demographics.
Right. Now what's the difference between the two there?
Well, the demographics is simply the numbers.
Right.
Their age, their financial goals, and their intent. The psychographics is what makes them sleep at night, what motivates them, what inspires them. The reasons, if you like, that they want to get financially independent and financially secure. And then we brought a business coach into our practice in around about 2000, and he worked with us for a couple of years and turned to me and said, I think you're in the wrong vocation. You should be a coach. So he recruited me, and we did an exit strategy out of my financial planning practice. And I actually went and worked with him as a business coach for a number of years before he shot through to London to build his coaching business internationally. What was left behind wasn't really sitting comfortably with me, so I decided to do my own thing. I took some time out to nurture the end of my marriage, and I wanted that to be done in a respectful and nurturing way. And after that, and anybody that's come out of a marriage will know that you don't come out of it without some emotional and financial wounds. And so I looked at what I was going to do with the rest of my life and my purpose in life, and of course how I was going to restore my financial stability and my financial independence, my financial future. And I had a good look at it and really gave some thought about going back into financial services. I knew the industry well. I knew I could make money there, but my heart wasn't in it.
Right. You'd moved on.
I'd moved on. So I looked at it and I thought to myself, what is it? I've enjoyed this business coaching, but I come to the realisation that I was getting the same issues in with business people as I was in the financial planning practice.
Right.
So it had little to do with their business and more to do with them, the business owners.
Yep.
So whenever there was a problem, if we could address the business owner, it usually fixed the problem in the business.
Yes.
And I learned it didn't matter how much I taught them about business opportunities, bottom lines, marketing, systems, and whatever the case would be. If they weren't in the right headspace or didn't have the right heart for it, then it didn't really matter. It wasn't going to work. Which explains why some people with the same age, same education, the same awareness, same level of experience, succeed at different levels.
Yes,
even in the same industry.
Yes, I was actually going to ask you about that, because it seems like there's no one set model for everyone, is there? Or is there?
Again, that's a yes and no.
It is. It's a tricky question, isn't it?
A yes and no answer to that question. What I've discovered, really, I mean, and I've, because of the journey I've been on professionally as well as personally, so I've been to a lot of personal development workshops, as you can imagine, to get my skill sets up in so many different ways, and observed what I would class as, in some cases, what I call seminar junkies.
Oh, right.
That people are consistently attending these, and they're getting the same information. Let's use a well-known brand as an example. Say Tony Robbins.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So everybody knows Tony Robbins. He draws thousands of people to his audience, right? Around the world, and he's got a whole franchise, a network around it now, and so people are absorbing the same information, but only 1 or 2% are actually using it to go ahead in leaps and bounds. Now, it's not to say that the others are not benefiting from it, but they're taking smaller, more incremental steps rather than the larger incremental steps. Now, it's the same information from the same person at the same time.
I've often found that people are very good at absorbing the information and taking on, and even logically sitting there saying, oh yes, that's good information, I can learn from that. It's the implementation of that in their lives that seems to be lacking quite often. Do you find that yourself?
I do, and you just used a word there that resonates wonderfully with the work I do. You said logical.
Okay, yep.
So that's something we're talking about at a conscious level. That's where logic is, at a conscious level. It's actually the subconscious the subconscious mind that determines the level of success that one and the destiny in one's life.
Right.
And that subconscious is really been set up in the formative years of a person's life. So their values and beliefs that they've inherited, they don't actually, they never asked for them, they were given them by their parents, by their schooling, by their peers, by religion, or whatever it is they encountered in those formative years.
Yeah.
And those values and beliefs are their foundation for their life, which is why one person can take a piece of information and it's not just logical, it makes sense to the subconscious as well.
Yeah.
Because the other person, it makes sense logically, but the subconscious is at odds with it. And there are so many examples, positive examples. I've read the biography of Bob Hawke, Gough Whitlam, Paul Keating. All of these prime ministers were told as children they were going to be leaders.
Right.
Bob Hawke was told he would be prime minister at the dinner table when he was in primary school. When he went to university and he was with his peers, and I asked him what he was going to do with his life, he said, I'm going to be prime minister one day. And they looked at him and said, that's a bit arrogant, isn't it? But it was a belief and a value that was instilled in him at a very young age.
And that he carried on.
And he carried on with that. Now, conversely, of course, if you get different stories, whatever the stories are, you're going to take on board, because at a young age, your brain is still developing. So it doesn't actually know how to filter right from wrong. It just takes on everything. It's absolute. And so whatever you're given. So there are examples, abusive relationships are examples, why do people continue to go back to abusive relationships? There's something in their values and belief, you know,
that links them to that. Yeah.
And there's a belief there that says, you know, maybe it's a self-belief, a worthiness belief. And there's another example of what I would consider to be a fairly successful business lady who built several times multi-million-dollar businesses. But as she got it to about a $3 or $4 million level, she had the uncanny knack of being able to dismantle it and destroy it.
Oh, really?
So she had the same, and so she went seeking after the third attempt of building a multi-million-dollar business and destroying it. She sought advice, and so she was with someone that did some timeline therapy.
Right.
It took her back to about 4 years old, and conversations that they used to have at the dinner table with their parents.
Right.
Her parents had invested with a local businessman, and the business had actually gone sour. And it appeared that the businessman come out of it, it looked like it anyway, come out looking okay.
Looking okay, yeah.
But the investors weren't so, they didn't feel so. So the dinner table conversation was around, well, you have to be a ruthless, excuse my language, to actually to succeed in business. So every time this lady succeeded in business, she thought, her belief in my values are I don't want to be ruthless like that. So she'd find ways of sabotaging.
Wow. Oh, yeah.
So when it was brought to her attention and then realised actually it wasn't even her story, it was her parents' story, she'd inherited it. But like any inheritance, you can let go of it.
Yes, exactly.
You can give it away once you've identified it. So, in fact, as a result of that, she now has a $30 million business.
Oh, right.
And has never gone backwards since.
Oh, fantastic. So the idea is to get into that programming, if you want to call it that, and try to alter that. Now, you have certain stages that you take people through. Do you want to explain a bit about that to help them deal with that?
The process?
Yes.
Sure. Well, I'll give you my skill sets, or some of the skill sets that we actually use to help people on their journey. So cognitive behaviour, ego state therapy, hypnotherapy, NLP practitioner, some of those things that we use to assist people. The first thing I do is I get people to do a diagnostic assessment, and it just really shows them more graphically how balanced they're living their life and what areas they might want to work on. But then I have a conversation with them about the fact, I take them forward in their life, and I say, you're actually at the end of your life now, and you're having an out-of-body experience at your own funeral service. And there's half a dozen people speaking on your behalf. You know, someone perhaps from your family, from the community, from people you've worked with, perhaps business or whatever work you've done, perhaps volunteer work that you might have done, your friendship group. What is it you would like them to be saying about you? Not what do you think they would say about you right now, but what is it you would like
them to say?
To be saying. What sort of legacy do you want to leave? Right? And so we'll tease that out. And now sometimes that could take hours. Sometimes it's only a half an hour. It depends on the individual and where they're at. Then, of course, the question begs, well, if you keep doing what you're doing now, what's the likelihood of that actually happening? Now, generally the answer is it's not. I mean, that's why they're talking to me. So,
exactly. If it was, they wouldn't be
They wouldn't be talking to me, right? They wouldn't need me. So then the next question is, well, then why is that? So what is it? So then we timeline back the other way, right? And look at what's actually happened to them, what's blocking them, what is it they've inherited in their early years, which is very likely where it's all happened.
Yes.
So we take them right back to as far back as they can remember. And it's really quite interesting because when you get them into the trance, into a hypnotic state, they remember a lot more than they will at a conscious level. And even myself, I hadn't been through the experience, the things that have come up for me, I've gone, wow, I didn't remember that, but it's all in there.
Just as an aside, I'm curious because other people I've spoken to have had this experience where they ask someone to go back to an earlier memory and they're suddenly talking about like a past life, that sort of thing. Do you have those things come up?
It does. I don't necessarily encourage it, but I don't. If it's in the flow, I don't stop it either.
Yes.
And and if it does, I'm hoping I've got it recorded for them.
Right. Okay, good.
And sometimes I do ask clients, if I sense it's going to happen, I say, would you like us to record this? Because, because people have got this idea around hypnosis that you're actually unconscious in an unconscious state, which you're not.
No.
You're actually conscious of what's going on. You're just in a more trance-like state.
Someone said to me once, it's like you're more highly susceptible to ideas and concepts that are being posed to you, which opens you up to seeing more. Does that sound about right? Or
I think that's a fair call, because you're more relaxed. I mean, your conscious mind is a defence mechanism as much as it is. So we were talking about logic before, but it's also a barrier, a wall to your subconscious mind.
Yeah.
It's actually one's defending the other, right? And they're very often at odds with each other.
Yeah.
The conscious mind is not aware totally what's happening in the subconscious. Subconscious has got it's your ultimate autobiography. Every thought, every feeling, every experience, every action, every inaction that you've taken is recorded. So every single thing that you've experienced in life is actually in your subconscious mind.
Yeah.
But of course, there's only so much the RAM can hold. The conscious. As I often use the IT.
I noticed that you were using that. Yeah.
So so you got your RAM, as I call it, the conscious, and you've got your hard drive, the subconscious. Right. Now, of course, with your subconscious, like any hard drive, and particularly when we were talking before about your formative years, when you gather this information in your formative years, when you're very young, your brain doesn't actually know what to do with it. So it's all over the place.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
Just scrambled.
It's scrambled up.
Yeah.
So there's not a wonder there's confusion, but there is values and beliefs in there, but you don't know where they're coming from. Hence, things that stop you, and you don't know why something's actually stopped you. That's one of the reasons.
Something kicks in.
Yeah. So I often say to people, when was the last time you had a defrag? Cleaned up your hard drive.
Yeah.
So yes, we do. Probably a long-winded answer to your question. We take people back. We look at what they've inherited.
Yeah.
We help them unpack that. Look at what's actually serving them and what's not, and saying, okay, so with the ones that's not, you can't erase it completely from your hard drive. But what you can do is you can compartmentalise it, and so it takes up less space and less energy.
Right. Yeah.
And that allows you then to actually put the values and beliefs that you want to store in there. Hence, people that change religion. They've decided that no longer serves them. Yeah. And they put it to one side and they actually take on something else.
Yeah.
But until you put it to one side, you can't do that. More particularly until you've identified that it's there.
Yeah.
You can't.
You can't fix something you don't know that's broken.
Exactly. So that's
So. Back to these stages that I've been looking at on some of your graphs here. Fascinating how you work from the core out. How did you come about with that? How did that come about, I should say?
Well, I mentioned before that, through my line of work and because of my personal interest, I've attended a lot of personal development workshops. And that I mentioned before, I wondered why, with the same information, people are not succeeding at the same level. So they're all maybe making successes, but not at the same steps. And realised that there was something holding them back. So what they were doing is taking this information on at a conscious level. So that's what you were saying before. So there's all this information being provided, it all makes sense, and this is what I'm going to do. And I turn around to people and say, you know what? This goal setting and vision boards and walking on hot coals is probably not going to work for most people. And they go, why? Tony Robbins said it would. And so, well, it won't, because you'll sabotage it. So at a conscious level, yes, that's what you should be doing, or thinking and feeling and trying to visualise. But your subconscious has got a different agenda.
And it's true, there's lots of people who've done the walking on the hot coals and still woken up the next day and they've still got their issues and
they've still got their issues.
been sorted, yeah.
And they're on their 6th vision board. So looking back, really, when you unpack it all, the biggest single most important ingredient for success in life is love. Self-love. So it's, when you were talking about outward and inward, so starting from you, the reason for that is because most training's done on an outward level.
Yeah.
We're saying no, until you actually fix the inner core,
The outer's not going to help, yeah.
you can go to all the programs you like on health and on your mission in life, on relationships and financial gain, or whatever it may be, and you'll struggle to implement it at a seriously successful level until you've dealt with the core. And the core of who you are is how you feel about yourself, right? And that love that you have for yourself, and that's not meant to be in an egotistical way. No. It's self-love, universal love, right? Again, a belief and a value that you've inherited. And sometimes, again, you're coming back to that abusive relationship example, obviously it wasn't a very productive inheritance.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Coming back to Bob Hawke, but if you're told you are worthy, you are loved, you are so worthy, you're going to lead this country one day. Now, if that's been installed into your subconscious in formative years, that's what you're going to grow up with.
Yes, it's a very positive program.
It's a very positive program, right? And then you can look at, with that self-love, your values and beliefs then develop around that. And your life roles develop around that. You know, whether you choose to be, a stay-at-home mum versus a working mum, or a stay-at-home dad versus a working dad, right? That's going to come from what you believe, right? The values that have been instilled in you at a young age. If you've come from a broken home, and particularly if it's an intergenerational, series of divorces, as much as you might want the happy ever after story, you've actually got a belief in your subconscious they don't exist.
Yeah. Right? So until you sort that, you're going to always find ways of self-sabotaging.
Exactly. So you start with the inner core and discover your self-love, and then you can decide, what values and beliefs you want to build around that. Having given away the ones that are not serving.
Yes.
And what life roles you're going to take, and then you can start looking at your purpose in life, your mission, your vision, the legacy that you actually want to leave. And when you've got that together, and when you hear people talking about living your life with gratitude and seeing the abundance, well, you'll own that. It won't just be a cliche.
That's it. It'll be something that's a reality.
It's a reality, because that's the way you'll feel about yourself and the way you'll feel about life. Now, if you've dealt with that core, hey, now what's it going to look like when you go to a workshop on relationships or on personal development or on communication? You're going into that space with a totally different foundation.
Open to actually receiving and activating that information.
Yeah, and your subconscious is actually dancing in tandem with your conscious.
Yes,
rather than actually fighting it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
We've heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? I've got Lyddy's version.
Okay.
Right?
Tell us about Lyddy's version.
Lyddy's version is that love. Love conquers all, bottom line. And that's where it all starts. Some people say, you need your health, and I agree with that. Absolutely. You're not going to... wealth is very important to people. And wealth, I don't just mean financially and, in various different aspects. But what I've learned is if you actually don't have the core of you, a love of yourself, again, not in an egotistical way, then really you're never going to be truly healthy.
Which is why love is at the core of all the things that you're doing here, yeah.
Correct. If you don't have love, then you're not going to look after your health. And even if you are disciplined with exercise and diet and whatever the case may be, if you don't feel that good about yourself, how can you be that healthy?
Exactly, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But more often than not, it does the opposite for a lot of people. There's not enough love there so much so that it sabotages their gym membership. It sabotages their good intentions around a healthy lifestyle, living, whatever it goes to be. So love is at the top of the pinnacle for me, followed by health, before wealth. So when people talk about going to wealth development programs, and I say, have you looked after your health first?
Yeah.
Right? Because you can't really truly be healthy. You can't. I'll rephrase it. You can't really truly be wealthy if you're not healthy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? And you can't be truly healthy if you don't love. So, love, health, and wealth. In that order is my hierarchy, Lyddy's hierarchy.
Now, am I correct in thinking after that is gratitude?
Yeah, well, that will naturally come. Yes. In fact, really, from the health and wealth component, gratitude and abundance is a mindset.
Right.
It's not a bank balance.
Okay, good.
And so if you've got the love and you've got the health, then as you step into looking at the abundance around you, that's where the wealth is. The wealth is in, and the abundance is taken in nature, walking on the beaches. It isn't just the amount of money that's in your bank account or the car that you're driving. It's
the quality of life.
It's a quality of life.
Yes,
Spot on. Yeah, spot on.
So what I'm seeing here is, because you're coming from this core of love, of understanding self-love, that no matter what a person's issue is, whatever that programming is that's blocking them, because you're taking them back to that as the core, you can always help, no matter who it is, be able to find what they're looking for by working that way.
Yeah, indeed, yes, yeah. And look, sometimes we get resistance. So people do come to you looking for help, but they don't always want to know the truth. Right? The truth can hurt for a while. But my job is to help them find the truth about themselves, the truth of who they are, because through living that truth and owning that truth, and that's where the love will come from it. So it's not an easy journey for everybody, but that's why they come to me, and that's why some people are willing to pay me some reasonable dollars for my efforts, is because I get results for them.
Right.
And often tell them some uncomfortable things. It can be quite confronting. Yeah?
So for some people, if they're open to themselves to a certain degree already, obviously the amount of time they need to spend with you is going to be a lot shorter than someone who's totally unaware of what's going on there.
Yeah, absolutely. But I have a minimum 90-day program that I actually work with people on, because I've learnt that it takes 90 days. You hear about people saying it takes 5 weeks or 7 weeks to change your habit. I think it takes 90 days to own it.
Right.
So you can change it, yes, but to actually own it, for it to be second nature, is a minimum 90 days in there. Now, the intensity within that 90 days will depend on how open and receptive it is, or how advanced they've already progressed. Most of my clients would work with me for up to 12 months.
Right.
And because they're looking to not only get back on the right track, but they're looking to move forward. You know? So
people who are just looking to have some sort of mental pampering, don't waste their time. This is some serious work here.
Correct. Yes. Yeah, sure, you can come for a mental massage, but it's like a physical massage. It lasts as long as the time that you've been given by the therapist, you know.
Fantastic.
Whereas I'm looking to have permanent changes for the clients.
Do you get to a point where someone isn't going to change? They're just too locked in. Does that happen? Are there people that can't make the leap, if you like?
The answer to that is yes, but I usually find out very early on. And I mentioned before that we have a very simplistic diagnostic tool that we get, and by the way, that people can actually download it free on the website.
Oh, good.
Okay, and it'll only take them 7 to 10 minutes to complete. When they've returned that, and when we have a discussion ultimately, then I give them a much more extensive diagnostic tool. Now that could take a person, depending on how intuitive they're operating from, and that's something I'd briefly like to discuss with you as well.
Sure.
It could take anybody from an hour to a whole day. The first time I did it, it took me nearly all day to do.
Right.
The very act of completing that exercise demonstrates the commitment that person has to their journey to change.
And I would imagine that based upon that information you gather, not only do you work out whether you can help this person, but you could also have a bit of an idea of the type of skill sets you need to put in place to help them as well.
Absolutely. And that's so. The first point is it tells me how committed they are.
Yeah.
Second point, it tells me what the issues are. Right? And as you said, the third point is then how do we tailor our program that's actually designed specifically for that particular person's needs, and what tools and skill sets do I need to pull out of the toolbox to assist them in that process.
Now, you mentioned just a moment ago one of my favourite words, intuitive.
Yes, one of my favourite subjects too. As people, we make decisions, we process decisions, and ultimately make decisions. No, I'll take that back a minute. We process decisions at 3 levels: our head, our heart, and our gut. And we all have a dominance. So some people just feel it, right? Some people just intuitively know it, and some people spend a lot of time in their head processing.
Right.
Accountants and QCs are classic examples of people that spend a lot of time in their head. And it's interesting that most people don't realise this. They're fairly high up on the bankruptcy list.
Really? I wouldn't have thought that.
No, you wouldn't, would you?
No.
You think, with that level of intelligence? The problem is they don't get out of their head. You see? The head is like a computer. It's like an Excel spreadsheet. You can just keep... there is always another what if. So you can't make a decision in your head because there's always something else that you can process.
Because you can just go in circles,
right? Ultimately, we actually make our decisions at an intuitive level. Ask any lady that's gone to buy a dress, right, and tried it on 3 or 4 times, or gone to a home and it just doesn't feel right, or they don't like the real estate agent. There's something about that person that doesn't quite resonate. So they're actually answering their question with their intuition, right? So most people actually operate from what I call the head down. So head, heart, and intuition. But ultimately, that's where you make the decision. So I encourage my clients and my friends and family to actually process from the bottom up.
Right.
So if you tap into your intuition and it doesn't feel right, you don't even have to worry about going into your head. Right? You don't have to waste the time processing
bypass that process.
You can bypass that. You just get straight to the bottom line. What does it feel like? What does my intuition tell me? Now, if your intuition says it feels good, and your heart feels good about it, feels good, then you can go into your head and say, how do I process this to make it work the best way I can? That's a good reason to go into your head.
It's interesting because what you're saying describes very much the way a lot of psychics and artists work, where they start with an intuitive thought or idea or piece of creativity and then bring it up into the manifest world.
Yeah, indeed. And they, some of those are actually, again, something that perhaps either in their DNA or in being instilled in them in their formative years.
Yeah.
And so they intuitively have this skill set. They don't even know where it comes from. Right? So I've analysed it and realised they're all there. I'm going, okay, now I'm very much a feeler. And then I go into my head. That used to be my pattern, go into my head. Well, I was in financial services. Logically, I was going to go into my head, right? But ultimately, I realised that I'm still making a decision down here, whether I was employing someone, whether I was taking someone on as a client, whether in fact the advice I was giving the client, whether it was financial advice or, in this case now mindset or life coaching advice, at the end of the day I still make the call at an intuitive level. Right? So, you're right, that question you asked before is everybody up for it? Well, intuitively I'll work that out. So I'll look at an analysis, but I'll get a gut feeling around it. And then I'll go into my head to work out which is the best way to process it for that particular client. how to tailor make that program for that particular client.
Fascinating. Steve, it's been fantastic having you in the studio here today. But for those that are watching, they can see some of your reference numbers here at the moment. Tell us a bit about the website that people can go to.
Well, look, if they go to the website and the details are
They're up at the moment.
there, look, there's some resources there that they can download free and utilise. So there's a self-diagnostic tool that I referred to before. There's another analysis, so you can determine whether you're having a midlife crisis or not, or any sort of life crisis for that matter. And in there is also a downloadable hypnosis recording.
Oh, right.
So relaxation recording. So it'll just take you into a good space, allow you to open up and visualise and do whatever you need to do, but take you into a state that makes you more receptive to the enjoyment of life or the relaxation of life, and or the learnings that you're looking to get out of life.
Yes, indeed. Steve, thank you so much for coming in. It's been a pleasure having you.
It's been a pleasure being here. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.